Joining me on the podcast this evening to talk about his brand new horror film, Night of the Reaper, is writer and director Brandon Christensen. Brandon, welcome to Fright Club. How's it going?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing fucking great. This is going to be awesome. I'm really excited to chat to you tonight about your film coming up. Thank you
Cool.
so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my
Um,
pleasure.
of course, we're here to talk about Night of the Reaper, a 1980s set slasher, which is available to stream on Shudder and AMC Plus on September the 19th. I had a lot of
Mhm.
fun with this one. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm really excited for everyone to see it. I know the film played at Popcorn Frights, is that right? I believe it won an award as well.
Yeah, we won scariest film there. Yeah, that was the world premiere.
Wow, how good was that? That must have felt amazing winning an award there.
Yeah, it was cool. It was this, it was a very memorable screening because I actually played two films back to back that night. We had two world premieres, and they're totally different films. Like the other one's a found footage, like super dark film, and then we played that one first, and it was very quiet in the theater. Like it was just like you could hear a pin drop. But
Hmm.
then when we played Reaper, the crowd just like came alive, and it was just like clapping during big parts and just like cheering and stuff like that. It was awesome. So. Yeah, it was definitely a memorable experience. And then coming out of that with Scariest, which was actually kind of surprising because I thought the other one played a lot scarier. But no, it was great. It's always amazing to be recognized for anything like that.
Cool. It feels very much like a popcorn horror film. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think horror fans love that type of film.
Hmm.
You said the other film was probably scarier in your mind, but, fans, I think, gravitate towards maybe the popcorn stuff more because it's
Sure.
kind of fun, especially if you're with friends at an audience.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So, how exciting and daunting is it to know that about a week or so this film is going to be out there for everyone to see?
Um, you're just hoping that it can make some sort of a splash, like my last one came out and it came out on Friday the 13th in October, but so did like so many other huge things. And so it got kind of buried and that was tough because you're just like so excited for release and then it's just everyone's talking about, Mike Flanagan stuff, all this other stuff, and you're an indie, so you're not going to get that level of publicity or anything like that. So it's been really cool. Like in the lead up on this, there's been, a lot of articles, a lot of big, varieties written about it twice. There's just been a lot more attention on it so far, and that's going to sort of start off the next wave of press leading to release next week. But I'm sure as we get closer, I'm going to start getting a little more, like scratching and like, just a little nervous and hair starts falling out and stuff like that. But you're just hoping that people see what you are trying to put out there, and it's a tough time right now because
Yeah.
there's so many choices for you.
And this is coming to Shudder, and I think some of your other films have been on Shudder before as well, so you must have a decent working relationship with Shudder. What's your thoughts on the whole kind of streaming versus cinema release debate that's out there at the minute?
It's definitely changed just sort of how movies are perceived and how they're made. Like, back in the day, a movie would come out in theaters and it would make money, and like, so you had to achieve a certain level of quality that I think with streaming, they've already got your money. And so there is, you'll see on Netflix, there'll be like massive movies coming out weekly with stars that normally, 10 years ago would have been in just like only in theatrical releases, but they're coming out in things and they're getting like a week of the public interest and then they just move on because something else comes out and replaces it. So I think, there's no like water cooler movies really that much anymore. I feel like Weapons kind of was like that was a big moment for horror. But it's tough. But it's just there's so many creators now. There's so many movies coming out that you need places for them all to go. So it's great, for someone like me who has this relationship with Shudder to be able to release a bunch of films like that. But in general, I don't know. I mean, you always kind of look back and wistfully for the time when, Steven Spielberg's movies were only in theaters and they made a big, they were like important. And I feel like films are less important now. We just get them all the time. So it's just sort of part of our culture that we're just constantly just watching movies and stuff like that. It's just different.
Yeah, it's a very different world now, isn't it?
Hmm.
Before we get into the film itself, I hope you don't mind if we rewind a little bit. Were you a horror movie kid when you were young? Did you have horror posters on your wall? What were some of the horror films that sort of scared you or inspired you when you were a kid?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely grew up watching horror movies, but I never really had the poster thing until when I was in high school. I worked at a movie theater, and so I got all the movie posters when they come through. So I had things like 13 Ghosts and stuff like that. But prior to that, I grew up watching like all the Stephen King miniseries, like It, The Stand, all those. And, it was very traumatic for me because I was only 6 years old and it was not something I should have seen. But, it just sort of created this long-lasting nightmare that as you get older, you're kind of like itching to have that feeling again. So, me and my friends, we would go to Blockbuster and just ask whoever's working. They're like, "Hey, what's the scariest movie you have?" And they would tell you, and you'd go home and watch it, and you'd just be like, "Ah, that wasn't scary at all." And then you do it again. You're just like chasing this high. And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely just like a lot of big movies in my, in my youth, that like things like The Shining, Scream, um, Halloween was a big one. Child's Play, the first one, that was a big one. They just sort of left that mark, and just sort of, you kind of grow up with those things. Just, you're in bed at night and you're young and you're watching the door because you're like, is Michael Myers going to walk in here? I don't know. So yeah, it was always just something that was, around and everything like that. And, as you get older and you leave the house and stuff like that, you continue and you just sort of like find your taste and your palette, and work through, because there's so many movies now, it's impossible to watch them all. So if you kind of know what you like, it's easier to watch the ones you like.
Did you always want to be a filmmaker? Like growing up, was that kind of your goal? And was there a particular horror film that you talked about The Shining there? I would assume that that's a big influence on most filmmakers nowadays. Was there one particular horror film or any other film or filmmaker that really inspired you to become a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, like Christmas 1993, we got a family camcorder, and it was just, the kids. I have three siblings. It was just always being used by us. We'd be shooting these stupid, movies, some superhero movies, horror movies, all these stupid things. And they were terrible, but they were fun. And it just, you just always that creative spark when you're behind the cameras is not something that I ever wanted to let go. So I always wanted to do it, but then you get to a point when you're a little bit older and your friends aren't really into it as much, and so you're kind of trying to find the confidence to like recruit people, and it's tough because they're just like everyone's doing their own thing and no one wants to make a silly movie sometimes. So, there was definitely a period of time in high school where it was just really hard to get anybody to do it. And so I kind of took a break, and then I went to film school after that. But one movie in particular that was really kind of just eye-opening and what you can do was Paranormal Activity. Because that was around the time when I think that was around like 2011, something like that. But, they made that for whatever, it was like 20 grand or something like that. And a lot of that money, the director, I think Oren, he just put into his house for like renovations to make the house work for the movie that he wrote. But it was really cool just to see like, oh, like, with a good idea and a good execution, like anything can be big. You see a lot of, there's always these breakthrough movies now, like Host, or that movie Good Boy that's coming out with the dog, and it's just like that's his first feature. He just has the dog, and he just shot it. Like you wouldn't do that in Hollywood. So I think the indie scene allows a lot of stuff like that where you can just really experiment and have fun. And Paranormal Activity was the first time that it really kind of hit home for me like that. Like, oh, maybe, you get 20 grand and maybe you can do that. And it just, takes some time to get to that point, but eventually I got there.
Cool, cool. And obviously you start in short films as most filmmakers do. Could you sort
hmm
of talk us briefly through the progression from a short film into your first feature film? And now I think this your fifth or sixth feature film?
This was the sixth one I've shot, but
Uh-huh.
the fifth releasing, because I have another one
Okay.
coming out next year that I shot before Reaper.
Oh wow, awesome. So what was the kind of progression from going from a short filmmaker to a feature filmmaker?
It's not like crazy different. It's the same steps. Like you go on set, you're doing the same thing. The difference is just you're doing it for a long time. Like in a short film, you might have a couple days of prep and a couple days to shoot it, but when you're doing a feature, you're gonna have like 3 or 4 weeks of prep and 3 or 4 weeks of shooting. So there's definitely it's like you're sprinting a marathon. It's when you're shooting, like time doesn't matter, nothing. You're in this like vortex of space time where only the movie matters. Like there could be aliens landing on Earth middle of production. I'd be like, I don't care. I can't focus on that right now. Let's deal with that in 3 weeks when we wrap. And so it's not too dissimilar. I think anybody that can do a short film, can, they can advance to a feature. It's just a matter of, it's like mindset. You just have to work your way up to it because that first day you do all this work, you prep for it, and the first day is usually really smooth because you've spent the most time working on it. And then you get to day two and you're like, oh shit, I have to do this again. And I did not prepare for day two as much as I did for day one, and things go wrong, and then you quickly go like, okay, I need to like figure out how to do this because I've got 3 more days this week before the weekend, and the weekend I'm going to be doing pickups of something else because we don't have time to do it on the main schedule. So it's just this a mindset of just being able to just do it and compartmentalize each day and just be like, okay, today I'm just going to tackle this. I tomorrow I'm going to tackle that, and you're just sort of it's weird, man. It's just like it's really hard mentally and draining, and then and it's the first half, weirdly enough, takes an eternity, and then once you pass that halfway mark, it feels like it's over in an instant. It's really weird.
Amazing. Okay, Night of the Reaper then.
Mm.
I think it's pretty obvious that yourself and your brother Ryan, who co-wrote the script, have a fondness for the VHS era. Would I be right in saying that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
you grow up recording things on TV, and you kind of, you can buy tapes, but creating your own like mixtape of movies and shows and like the commercials that are on it, like you remember. It was just like such a personal thing. Like you could create these tapes that would be just like yours. Like no one else had that exact same tape unless you bought it. But I had so many different movies and I'd make labels for them and they would just be like, movie after movie. No, and it was just like such a cool time that, I kind of miss now with the digital age and everything is just
Mm.
available. Back then you really had to create it.
It was a simpler time as well, wasn't
Yeah.
it? Can you remember when the idea for this film came about? And well, I know for a fact you were inspired by other horror films, but can you sort of tell me specific horror films that helped in the creation of this idea?
Yeah, so when I was in the eighth grade, I saw When a Stranger Calls at a birthday party, and just that first 20 minutes is just like this iconic intro that kind of set the stage for things like Scream and stuff like that. But it always just sort of stuck in the back of my head, and every feature that I've done, I've kind of played with a different subgenre in the horror space, like kid horror, mom horror. Kind of comedy horror with the influencer stuff with Superhost. Puppet Man was more of a possession thing. And so you're kind of like, okay, well, what's another subgenre I want to tackle? And I was just like, oh, well, I loved When a Stranger Calls, and House of the Devil was such a great movie that no one's really doing the babysitter thing. And so my brother and I were talking about it, and I was just like, I was thinking maybe it's a supernatural movie or something. I just wanted to do something with a babysitter, and we just started talking about this idea of this babysitter filming or babysitting, and then like someone's filming them, and it just sort of started to roll into this whole thing. And then in 2020, I was shooting Superhost, and my brother, he just kind of took a stab at the opening cold open and sent it to me while I was shooting, and I just read it, and I was like, holy shit, like this is so well realized and everything. And other than just some like small cut downs, it really hasn't changed since that first draft in 2020. And then he kind of took it and did some more, and we worked on that, and then we, eventually just kind of got it to the place it was. But it was always just sort of like trying to recapture that feeling of When a Stranger Calls that I saw at that birthday party.
Awesome. One thing that I really appreciated about the film was, as much as I love an 80s reference, I really
Hmm.
enjoyed your restraint that went into the film because I think there's a lot of films out there that are inspired by 80s horror or that are set in the 80s and they sort of maybe go a little bit too over the top. You
Hmm.
know, how difficult was it for you to not drop in loads of neon lighting and lots of needle drops? Because that's all that 80s horror is nowadays.
Right. I mean, honestly, if I had money, I would have bought more music. It's, I like there's two main ones in there now and they're pretty great.
Yeah.
And I've never really had needle drop music like that before, so it was cool to finally have that and have it become part of the scene. Like that Pat Benatar scene at the beginning. Um, I in the script it was basically just like she snoops and finds cigarettes, and we got a list of music that we could afford, which wasn't, a lot. And on the list was this Pat Benatar song. And I listened to it and I was like, oh my God, like this is such like a young girl would love this song and she would be babysitting. She would have this like empowerment of just being alone in a house that's not hers and the kids have gone to bed. So she's kind of just like free for the first time as a teenager. It just felt like this really cool like rallying cry for her, and she could just like belt it out and dance and sing and drink some Coke and stuff like that. It just sort of created this new moment that I love so much because it was so much fun to shoot and do. But yeah, I mean, the neon thing, I feel like that's kind of it's like a fantasy 80s that doesn't really exist. I think near the end of the 80s, a little bit more of that neon came in, but in general, the neon or the 80s were incredibly drab. Like, you look at Stranger Things season one, super drab, super blah, like it's very grounded in reality. And then they kind of get to that mall season in season three, and all the neon comes in, and it's just like it looks cool. They did it really well. It's just it doesn't really feel real. And so I think the goal with this was just like I want it to feel like the 80s and not how we remember them, but how they actually were.
Hmm. I did love all the browns and the oranges and stuff. I do like
Hmm.
that. I'm glad you mentioned House of the Devil because it really did bring me back to that film as well.
Yeah.
Was there any other songs that you wanted to use? That obviously you just didn't have the money, and where would you maybe place them in the film if you could have?
There's a scene when Dina's driving to the house and she's crying. That's like, if you've seen the movie, it kind of recontextualizes what she's doing there. But at the time, like, we thought we could maybe get some kind of banger song, like something from Donnie Darko, Echo and the
Hmm.
Bunnymen, or something just to drive that moment a little bit. But it's tough. And then with Willis's apartment, when the sheriff goes there and he finds the tape. There's a song that's playing on it, and it sounds like a song that might exist, but actually, it's just the guys that did the score, Michelle, Terry, and David. They just made that, and it just sounds like that time. But I definitely wanted to get some like Depeche Mode or something
Hmm.
like that that could have been, really loud because that whole thing was kind of inspired by the game with Michael Douglas when he goes home and like his house is covered in graffiti and the music's just like blaring. We couldn't quite do it to that effect, but. That was kind of the idea going into that. So just having some like really notable 80s banger would have been really cool there.
Cool, cool. I was really impressed by Jessica as Dana and her
Hmm.
screen presence as a final girl. Thought she was fantastic, particularly towards the end.
Hmm.
How important is it for you to get the right cast? Obviously, casting is really, really important, but for this one
Hmm.
particularly, how important was it to get the right girl?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy important. You need someone that feels period accurate, like that's a big thing now. Like, because I think people look different now than they did back then. And so you're trying to find people that like can fit that, and that can be tough sometimes because people keep changing their appearances, and hairstyles change, all these things change, but Jessica just has these like giant eyes that are just like windows into her soul. And so when she did her audition tape, there's the scene where she's doing the walkie-talkie with playing hide and seek, and just watching her eyes just watch nothing. She's just acting in a room by herself, but you could just see the fear, you could see all of the things that we wanted to have, and yeah, she just nailed it. So it's just a matter of just like, do they are there's so many good actors out there. So I mean, casting isn't always just about good. It's about a lot of things. It's how do they react to the material? Are they just acting, or are they able to experience some stuff through it, or they experience certain things that maybe this character's experienced and they can bring that into it. There's so many things, and so I mean, casting's always super fun because they'll also bring stuff to it. Like one thing in particular that the actors brought was Maddie Finocchio and Sophie Kane, who played Butch and Dottie. Their little flirty relationship thing that was totally unscripted. As scripted, actually, Dottie was like a 60-year-old woman, but Sophie had read for Hattie, and she had a great read, but it was just like too many brunettes, and so I was just like,
Hmm.
oh, well, maybe we can put her into the sheriff's station, and she can be a younger kind of a cuter receptionist. And then Maddie came in, and he's just like, hey, we're gonna try something. And so on the first take, they just start flirting with each other, and it was just this extra element that we never could have written, but it works so well and just gives this extra little texture to the performance.
Awesome, man. That sounds awesome. I don't want to give away any spoilers here, of course, but a lot of films, for them to stand out, they need like a twist. They need something
Hmm.
in it to kind of stand out.
Sure.
There is a fantastic twist in this, which we're not going to spoil here. But was the twist always there from the start, or did that just come kind of organically as you were writing the script?
Yeah, no, it was definitely part of it because that when we first had those discussions, like, House of the Devil exists, and that's like the perfect babysitter movie from, this era. When a Stranger Calls, that opening, that's like the perfect babysitter thing from that era. So having, if I just did a 90-minute babysitter in peril kind of movie, I think audiences wouldn't respond to it very well because, I think if House of the Devil was made today, it wouldn't be as well regarded as it was back then because people are always just, attention spans are shrinking. People are like, oh, it's a slow burn. And back in the day, that used to be a good thing. But now when people say it's a slow burn, oftentimes it's a negative. And so you definitely need to keep things changing. And so you kind of have like the cold 10-minute opener, then you've got like 20 minutes of setup, then you've got 30 minutes of like babysitter stuff while the investigation is going on with the sheriff, and then it transitions into something completely different that you weren't expecting, hopefully. And I think that's what's really exciting about it is because by the time the twist happens, you're like, okay, I've seen the opening, I know where this is going, and then it doesn't, and it goes somewhere else. And I think that's really cool. And just keeps the audience's attention longer, which is something that you're just trying to battle all the time.
Yeah, well, I definitely wasn't expecting the twist, so
Cool.
I think it'll shock a lot of people. I think a lot of times in these kind of slasher films, you're just thinking about who the killer is,
Right.
but you sort of forget about other things that might be going on.
Yeah, and
I'll
that's the sorry, just to jump in
Yeah,
that,
of
but that's
course.
totally intentional. And if someone, you can't expect someone to watch it again, but if they do, it's a completely different film. Like every look, every dialogue that happens, it has a completely different feeling to it when you know what's going to happen later. So, I would encourage, if you have a chance, just like watch like the first 25 minutes over again after the cold open, and you'll be like, oh, like it's totally different. And so when we did our world premiere, I was sitting in the audience and I'm watching knowing everything and I'm just like, "Oh my God, everybody knows the twist. It's over." At like 10 minutes in and my wife's like, "It's fine. It's fine." But yeah, it's just it's cool when you know it because it does change everything.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to rewatch it. So I want to talk about The Mask as well because so many horror films through the years have had these iconic masks, and it can become very important to the
Hmm.
marketing of the film and just the general sort of how it's perceived by horror fans. The skull mask is quite a popular mask that you see in a lot of Halloween stores in every town. Was this something that, there it is? Is that the right? Is that the actual one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
awesome.
we had two of them, but that yeah, I got one of them. I don't know where the other one went,
That's so
but yeah,
cool, man.
I asked for
Um,
it.
was there any other variations of the mask?
No, I mean, in the script, it's just like listed as a Reaper, Grim Reaper kind of style. And so one of our production designers, this guy Andrew, I think he went to like Spirit Halloween and bought one, and then he just painted all the details in and like filled in the eyes with nylon. And yeah, he just kind of made it his own and just, I think it was just like pure white. But if you look at it now, there's
Hmm.
just so much shadowing and texture detail and stuff like that in it.
The teeth are really
That's
cool.
yeah, the teeth are cool. So he really just kind of made it his own. It was, first pass he just showed me and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's brilliant. I love it." So
Awesome,
it's
man.
yeah, we got lucky.
Cool, cool. So we've established that you're a big 80s horror fan, as am I. If you could take any 80s horror icon and make your own film, who would it be and what would be your pitch?
I think Nightmare on Elm Street. I think,
Okay.
they did the one with Jackie Earl. Oh, was it
Haley, yeah.
Haley?
Check it out,
Yeah.
Haley.
Yeah, when he did it and it was cool. I mean, I think it spent more time on his backstory and stuff like that, which was interesting. But what made the 80s ones were so fun was just the creativity and just like the set pieces in those were so cool and just like over the top and funny. And it was just, I think having a killer like that has such a crazy personality because you're used to the faceless, the Michael Myers, the Jason Voorhees, all these guys that are just stalking and killing, but Freddy made it fun. And so I think, bringing that back and just really kind of pushing the limits of what you can do with these scare things, like how the world changes, like really going down like an Inception level path where, when you're in the dream world and he's attacking you or whatever, he can do anything. And so now we have the technology to really do anything. And I think that there's like so many cool opportunities for that and just like, just go nuts because, Final Destination Bloodlines, like the deaths, they've evolved so much just,
Mm,
using practical, like that garbage chute thing with how I don't know if you saw how they shot it, where they used like those pins.
hmm.
So it's actually this practical thing that like bends around their face, and then they can digitally replace some stuff and make it look better. But just what we're able to do now, bringing that back into the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, I think would be a ton of fun.
Awesome, man. And since we're celebrating 80s horror, there's been loads of legacy sequels to 80s films in recent years.
Hmm.
What film or franchise from the 80s, or maybe even the 70s, would you like to see get a legacy sequel?
Ah, that's a good question. I mean, it'd be cool to see When a Stranger Calls come back
Mm,
because, it had a couples, but I never even saw them. Then there was one in, in the early 2000s, I think, and they tried it again, but it never really had what it did now. I mean, yeah, I don't know if you remember like Platinum Dunes, they did stuff like Dawn of the Dead, which was with Zack Snyder,
hmm
and they did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Jessica Biel, which was like a legit great movie.
mm,
And so I think, they tried it back then, but now it's been another 20 years since that happened. So I mean, I think trying it again with Nightmare on Elm Street, like I said, or Friday the 13th, which I know they're doing the TV show. But just, there's a lot of people that want those back. And so I think bringing them back to the front, like Halloween did a great job coming back with Blumhouse. I didn't think that the movies were, especially the second and third one, I didn't love them, but
mm,
it definitely brought the slasher back. And so now you've got like I Know What You Did Last Summer coming back. So, Scream's kind of always been back, but bringing back like a real Friday the 13th would be, great. And, Nightmare on Elm Street, just having those two compete again and having the hype of like
hmm
which is better, is Freddy or Jason. That was such a fun time in like the 90s and just, arguing who was your favorite killer. That's great.
Yeah, I want to see another Ghoulies film
Okay.
or
There you go.
killer clowns from outer space.
Yeah,
Something really
sure.
out there, something really silly. Speaking of horror icons, do you think there are any modern horror icons that exist now, or is it too difficult to create them nowadays?
Um, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think Aunt Gladys from Weapons is going to be used again. Like they've already been talking about a prequel.
Hmm
But again, that's someone that is like really fun and like personable and like makes you laugh while making you scared. And I think that's what is so cool about like Freddy, and it allows them to have this staying power. I think like Mark Duplass and Creep. Now he's got the Creep tapes, and
hmm
that's something that's sort of stayed for like 15 plus years, which is pretty cool. But I think it just needs to be, it's tough for a faceless, voiceless villain to really stick like it did back then, because you need to be able to identify that with them. I think like in A Violent Nature, that's getting a sequel right now. It's kind of the same thing. I don't know. I only saw bits and pieces of the first one, but I think that I don't know. The killer, it seems cool, but
hmm
I think the thing that the staying power with that movie is just the point of view of the film, which is from the killer's point of view, which is
Yeah.
super novel. But yeah, I think Aunt Gladys and I can't remember in Creep, what's his name? He's a good one.
Yeah, I suppose maybe Art the Clown is probably the nearest thing
Oh yeah, for sure, of course.
we've
Yeah, that's
got
marketed
to.
like crazy.
Yeah, it's done
Yeah,
quite well for itself over the
yeah,
past few years.
yeah, of
Um,
course.
so Night of the Reaper, was this the biggest budget you've had compared to your other films? Did you have
Uh,
any sort of bad experience filming any of the scenes at all, or was it tough?
Um, yeah, yeah, I mean, budget is always kind of funny because like Puppet Man, when we did that, that had the biggest cash budget, but we shot it in New York and we didn't take advantage of the tax credits. Whereas Night of the Reapers, its budget was probably 60% of Puppet Man, but because we had really aggressive tax credits in Alberta, it like tripled the budget. And so we did have a lot of money, but you're also like you're forced to, because of the tax things, spend it on certain things that you wouldn't normally do if you were
Mm,
just trying, because most of my movies are like well under 500. And so you're trying to, every dollar matters. You're throwing every dollar at the screen. And on this, like there's certain things you have to spend money on just to get your tax income. It's really complicated
hmm
and it just becomes a different thing. But to answer the second question, there's this sequence near the end. It's, in the last half hour when there's a bunch of reapers hanging up in the forest and there's like a showdown there. Really cool. They dressed it up really cool. It was like one of those things where like, how many Reapers do we need? I was like, all of the Reapers. Like, we need as many as we can get. And so they had like seven, and I was like, that's not going to do it. We need more. And so they took that, and instead of just like adding three, they just, they went crazy and they made like 40 of them. And so that was really cool. But that, Calgary, where we shot it, the weather's very unpredictable, and so it got very, very cold that night, and that was an overnight because you had to be outside all night. And you're dealing with actors that are they're not acting cold, but they have to be on the ground, they have to be bloody, they have to be all of these things, and it's just like time just goes fast. You don't have time to do anything, and you've got this huge sequence with a monologue, and you've got all this stuff, you've got stunts, you've got this thing, and everybody's working very slowly because you're outside, it's cold, and it's just like very, very quickly you're looking over at the horizon and you start seeing the sun come up and you're just like, I still have like three more pages to do. I got to do this. I'm cutting shots. You're doing all that stuff and you just hate yourself that you didn't work faster earlier and now you're too late. And so we actually had to reshoot some of it because when we shot like I don't want to say the spoiler, but there's stuff at the very end of that scene. It was like full morning. And I was just like, I'm never going to be able to color grade this down. And so we had to come back another day the next week and do it again. And when you do that, that's fine because you know exactly what you want. So you're not guessing. You're just like, okay, we need to do this. I need this insert, that, and then we're done. And so there's that. That was definitely a nightmare. And then we had a big snowstorm near the end of the shoot that was challenging because we had to like shoot in specific pockets where the snow hadn't had kind of melted in the sun. And so there's a conversation with Liz, the state trooper, and the sheriff and the deputy, and they're on the middle of the road. That was like this one small patch of land that had no snow, and we just had to do it. We couldn't permit it because we didn't know it existed until the morning of. So we had to put a PA on both sides, and they've just got radios, and they're like, "Cars are coming, cars are coming." Let them, we're just like, "Okay, hold them for like 5 minutes. We got to let them through." And it was like very illegal, but we didn't really have a choice. It was like that or don't shoot the movie because if you did it right, we just didn't have time to do it right because of the overnight snowfall.
That's a crazy story, man.
Yeah, movies are stupid. It's just like you're constantly dealing with stuff like that where it's
Yeah.
just like, God damn it, sucks.
So I have to ask you, surely you have an idea for a sequel. You have to have an idea for a sequel for this one.
I mean, there's more tapes that you could definitely play with, but honestly, it's one of those things where it's just like it feels like it closes. The ending, it has this, a little bit of hope to it. And it's the first movie I've ever done with like a positive ending. Like usually they always end and you're just like, ah, like it's got that almost like Inception ending with the top
Mm.
spinning, and you're just like you kind of are waiting for something, waiting for a conclusion, and you don't get it. Um, but this one, I feel like it starts where it ends where it starts, and it's just kind of this cool this feeling of like hope that we're going to be able to defeat this thing. And so I don't know. I mean, I'd love to do another slasher again and like really lean into that style from the first 10 minutes because that was super fun. Whereas the rest of the movie has kind of a different feel. I don't know. We'll see what happens next, but I think right now Night of the Reaper is probably done.
So what's next for you? You mentioned you've got another film on the horizon. Are you allowed to talk about that now, or is...
Yeah, because I mean, we had a world premiere, back last month. It's called Body Cam. It's like two cops investigating a domestic dispute, and there's an accidental shooting, and their cameras are on their chests, and so it's recorded
Oh,
everything, and they're just like, shit, like this is gonna look really bad if this footage comes out, so we need to cover it up. And so the movie's about them trying to cover up this thing that they did, and as they're trying to cover up, they're like digging up worse and worse things, and everything just keeps getting way worse. And they kind of go through like a nightmare night. But it's cool because it's all shot on body cams. So there, it's found footage, which I'd never done
nice.
before. It's just really interesting because it's not like there's no hand, no one's controlling the cameras. It just is capturing it. It's very fly on the wall. But you're like right in it. So if you've ever watched like YouTube videos with body cam stuff, which I'm sure you have,
Hmm.
it's kind of emulating that feeling, which is really kind of cool.
Awesome. And is that going to be another Shudder release?
Yep.
Yeah,
And it'll
awesome.
be they don't want me to say when yet, but
Okay.
like first half of next year.
Good, good, good. Definitely, definitely be keeping an eye out for that one. Brandon, thanks very much for taking the time to join me on the podcast tonight. Best of luck with the film's release and best of luck with Bodycam and future projects.
Thank you, Gavin. This was fun.